Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to 2023 Green Energy New Economic Impetus Forum. Our event will start in 5 minutes. Please take your seat and please switch your mobile phone to silence or vibrate mode. Thank you for your cooperation. Good afternoon, everyone. Our event is about to start. Please take your seat as soon as possible. The event will be conducted in Chinese with English simultaneous interpreting online so that we can reach more people. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and everyone watching in person and online, good afternoon and welcome. We're glad to have you here at the 2023 Green Low Carbon and Sustainable City Green Energy New Economic Impetus Forum, co-hosted by USTV and the Taiwan Smart City Solutions Alliance. I'm Jessica Bay, your host and anchor from USTV. Sustainable development has become a crucial focus for both Taiwan and the world. Countries around the world are embarking on net zero pathways, planning and implementing measures. Green energy plays a vital role in this transition, requiring smart technologies and collaboration between industries as well as international partnerships to achieve net zero emissions targets. We are honored to have several leading industry representatives with us today who have made significant strides in energy transition. They will be sharing their remarkable achievements with us, and at the end of the forum, there will be a Green Energy Summit, which we are looking forward to. Now, I'd like to introduce the speakers and guests to you. First of all, Mr. Gong Ming-Xin from National Development Council. Thank you. Mr. CEO Liang Baohua from USTV Financial R&D Foundation. Co-organizer President Jing Qi from Taiwan Smart City Solutions Alliance, TSSA. And the speakers, industry representatives. First of all, Chairman Li Shunqing from CPC Corporation. And Chief Administration Officer Wang Du-Cun from ASE Group. And then General Manager Ms. Zhao Shuming from JNV Energy Technology. Let's give a round of applause to welcome all our distinguished guests. Faced with climate change, the UN encourages all the cities to pay attention to sustainable development. This has become a global trend, and city mayors have high responsibilities. So today, at the beginning of this forum, we have specially invited 10 city and county mayors throughout Taiwan to share their thoughts and ideas. Let's look at this video.
台中的永续发展是秀燕从政的核心目标，不止8年执政，也为城市100年的发展设定良好的方向。台中透过宣示2050净零碳排倡议，推动能源转型、产业转型以及生活转型，持续往正确的道路前进。
因为大家共同努力的结果，使得我们每年绿能的发电已经达到49.5亿度。 另外呢，台南市也因为这样子获得了2022年的国家永续发展奖。
气候变迁对每一个城市、国家而言都是一个严峻的挑战，没有人可以置身事外。如何落实2030年低碳城市？我们希望说能够繁荣共享，不遗落任何人，把高雄打造成为一个绿色低碳。 永续的城市，
新竹县身为地球城市的一份子，以拼经济、重文教、人民享福利、乐安居为己任，让科技首都幸福永续。
新竹市身为全球的科技重镇，我们会因应国际的气候变迁的永续发展的相关的战略。那同时呢，我们会落实温室气体的减量，成立专责的单位。那我们希望能够为下一代可以打造更好的新竹市。
响应2050净零碳排，永续发展不再是选择，而是责任。彰化县政府以全球思考、在地行动来出发，全力打造低碳家园，迈向永续幸福的城市。
南投县将会以低碳永续为核心，数位创新为解方，打造全民有感的宜居城市，
接轨国际，迈向永续城市。 未来云林县221项计划都将符合联合国 SDGs 的规范。2030云林永续发展主轴将以永续农业、大健康产业、绿色典范经济发展为3大亮点。
嘉义县是以农工大县为发展的目标，那但是也要兼顾环境的平衡，所以我们在创新经济、在低碳运输或者是在绿电的发展，那我们都往 尽心尽力，那努力来维持这个城市的永续发展。那嘉义县现在绿电的发电量已经可以 cover 掉我们现在嘉义县的所有的民生用电，所以我们希望为地球、为台湾尽一份最大的心力。那我们也希望在2050净零碳排这样的一个目标里面，我们为永续城市的发展尽最大的努力。
对于屏东来说，永续发展是必然的过程。我们努力透过永续环境跟产业的发展建制，开 开创屏东的多元面貌。未来我们的竞争优势就在这里。绿色低碳永续城市。
谢谢所有发表城市永续发展观
Thank
点的
you,
县市
all
首
the
长。
city and county mayors.
迈向美好的
It
未来。
requires collective
城市永续呢
efforts to
需要
embrace a brighter
科技化
future.
智慧化的推动。
We
接下来让我们
need
掌声
smart
有请今
and
天
intelligent
座谈的共同
solutions
主
for
办单
that.
位同时
Now
也
I'd
是
like to
对台湾
welcome the
城市城市
co-organizer of
非常
today's
重要的单位
event,
欢迎台湾智慧城市企
President
业联盟
Jing
执行
Qi
长
from
将
Taiwan
台湾
Smart
今天
City
的活动
Solutions
做开场
Alliance
语
to
掌声
give
有请。
her opening remarks. Mr. Yang, Minister Gong, and Chairman Li, Mr. Wang from ASE, and Ms. Zhao from JNV, distinguished guests, scholars, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends from media, good afternoon. I am Jing Qi from Far East Telecom. I have two hats. I'm also the president of Taiwan Smart City Solutions Alliance. This is the 10th edition of this event. I'm really honored to be the president, and this is also the first year of net zero cities. I remember that Mr. Gong once told me in a previous event about 2050 net zero pathway for Taiwan, and we have seen the 12 strategies. I'm sure that he will share more about that. And at the time, Minister Gong told me that he would want to combine the two events, smart cities and green cities, combined together, which makes a lot of sense. This is why I believe that today the number of exhibitors and participants will break a new record. There are 1,350 participants from abroad with 40 or so countries and more than 150 cities. In addition, there's net zero exhibition, and this time, this is an urgent issue globally. We just heard from the 10 city and county mayors speaking in the video. 75% of global emissions come from large cities, so cities are a good starting point for our efforts. In the 12 strategies from National Development Council, we can see that we need to have new energy sources, especially green energy sources. I'd like to thank USTV and USTV Financial R&D Foundation to co-organize this event with us. And they have invited representative enterprises, including CPC Corporation, GNV Energy Technology, and ASE Group to share with us what they have done in net zero and energy transition in their keynote speeches and the Exchange Summit later. I'm sure that the participants on site and online will learn a lot from them later. As president of TSSA, I want to remind you that after the forum, you will have to go to the exhibition hall. I'm also the general manager of Far East Tone, so I want to also tell you that we started smart city efforts very early on. So this year we have 22 exhibitions in this event. Finally, I wish great success to the forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jing, for the opening remarks. The promotion of net zero emissions and sustainability requires the joint support of central and local governments as well as industries. So now, I'd like to introduce you to a very important person behind Taiwan's net zero emissions pathway. Please welcome Minister Gong Mingxin from the National Development Council. Thank you. Mr. Liang Baohua from the USTV Financial R&D Foundation, Ms. Jing Qi from TSSA, Chairman Li, Ms. Zhao, and Mr. Wang. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very delighted to be able to participate in this forum. Just now, I was telling Ms. Jing Qi that this is the third time that we've been on the same stage. So I think it's actually the fifth time that I've spoken today, but I'm really very happy to be here. Often people ask me about whether I have confidence that we can achieve net zero in 2050. Last year, I told Ms. Jing Qi that the government is determined to push for net zero, and we hope that the industry can work with us so that we can achieve this goal together. Now, this year, I'm actually even more confident than ever. So from the room today, you can already see that this is really a very packed room, and it shows that people are really paying more and more attention to this issue of net zero. Ms. Qing said that in the exhibition hall, we have 2 exhibitions. So we have exhibitors from many countries and countries. So I want to update the figures. We actually have more than 1,500 foreign visitors, and they come from more than 115 cities. And many of these visitors come from abroad. So in fact, they come from 43 countries and regions. And recently, the deputy mayor of Kyiv, in fact, also arrived in Taiwan despite the ongoing war in Ukraine. So we are really very moved by his support. And I believe that our effort has been seen around the world. Now, I've heard foreign visitors giving us recognition for this event. Many countries also have exhibitions on net zero technologies and sustainability. So, for example, in Barcelona and also in other cities, they have exhibitions like this as well. But I remember this visitor told me that he felt he really saw net zero solutions or sustainability solutions. So in exhibitions in other countries, maybe there are a lot of lectures. But in Taiwan, in our exhibition, we have the real tangible solutions that can help us save energy and cut carbon emissions. And we also have environmental monitoring devices. They are all tangible, all here. And he told me that he didn't see this in other exhibitions. And I think that this is where Taiwan can contribute to the global effort to achieve sustainability. And this is also the competitive advantage of our industries. So we should use this platform to tell the whole world of what we can do. And of course, the foreign visitors also tell us what they need. So with this feedback, we can do even better, and this will help us all move forward in this journey to achieve net zero. Now, this room is very crowded, but I'm really very happy to see this. And just now, Ms. Jing Qi put in a plug for her own company. So here I also want to tell you that you can go to the 4th floor to take a look at our booth. So my council, the National Development Council, and also other ministries in the government have booths as well. Maybe our booths are not as fancy as the booths of other companies, but on the 4th floor, you'll be able to see the government policies. And all these policies also have English versions, and we have QR codes for you to scan so that you get to know more about our 12 key strategies. So I believe that with all this information, you'll have an overview of Taiwan's policy. Here, I'd also like to say that the private sector, the media, and the general public, with your support, when we implement the net zero pathway and the 12 key strategies, I think we can do better and better. So we have earmarked 900 billion Taiwan dollars to promote sustainability. Now, the first year is just the beginning, but in the first year, we already have more than 60 billion Taiwan dollars in budget, and this budget will increase year by year. And we hope that the government investments can also encourage private investment. We hope that the investment can reach 4 trillion. In addition to offshore wind, we also hope to develop geothermal energy and hydrogen technologies. So we hope that all these technologies can be used in the real world by 2030. And we also hope to generate an economic output of 5.9 trillion and to create more than 500,000 jobs. In the video, we also heard from the different mayors, and the Kaohsiung mayor said that it's important that no one is left behind. So within our 12 strategies, one very important component is just transition. Now, of course, as we transition to a new era, some people may face risks. They may lose their job. So we cannot leave anyone behind if we are to succeed. So once again, I'm very delighted to be part of this forum, and I wish this forum a great success. Thank you. Thank you, Minister Gong. So now, I'd like to invite all the distinguished guests onto the stage for a photo. So once again, Minister Gong Mingxin, Mr. Liang Baohua, and also Ms. Jing Qi, and Mr. Lin Zhiqing, and also our 3 speakers, Chairman Li Shunqing from CPC Corporation, Chief Administration Officer Wang Ducun from ASE Group, and General Manager Zhao Shuming from JNV Energy Technology. Please join me on the stage for a group photo. Okay. So, are you ready? Okay. Are you ready for the photo? Here we go. And thumbs up for a second photo. Thank you very much. Any more photos? All right. Thank you very much. Please be seated.
In this precious occasion, I have a personal request. I'd like to take a selfie with everyone, including the audience and the distinguished guests. So let me have a final countdown of 10 seconds. You can take up your masks. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much for your participation. Now I'd like to invite the professional cameraman to take a group photo with all of you. 3, 2, 1, please smile and also thumbs up. Let's wish great success to our event today. Thank you for your passionate participation. Now we are entering into keynote speeches. Let's welcome Chairman Li Shunqing from CPC Corporation. As CPC Corporation faces global demands for carbon reduction, it quickly adapts to enable corporate transformation. Now, I'd like to invite Chairman Li Shunqing to share with us the plans and strategies that CPC Corporation has in place to embrace the future energy transition. Distinguished guests, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizer to invite CPC once again to participate in this great occasion as part of the energy and petrochemical industry. We bear the brunt of the 2050 net zero emission pathway. So I'd like to say a few words with you. First of all, let's look at the climate crisis that we are faced with. Climate crisis. Last year, there was a very popular book published titled Action Plans to Implement Net Zero. It was an objective key results OKR approach to tell everyone that to implement net zero emissions, plans are important indeed, but actions are even more important. The author is from the Silicon Valley, John Doerr, who is very popular in the startup sector in the US. Why did he write this book? Well, you may remember about the Buffalo snowstorm at the end of last year. It was like a movie scene. Have you ever watched the film The Day After Tomorrow? The scenes in the movie really happened last year. And if we remember the documentary by Al Gore, The Inconvenient Truth, you may remember this documentary. So this book that I talked about starts from here. One day, his daughter Mary and he watched The Inconvenient Truth together, and after that he asked Mary, what do you think about the documentary? And Mary told her father, Doerr, saying that I am scared and I'm angry. Your generation creates this problem. You'd better face it. And after hearing this, he felt very sad. And Doerr donated a fund to Stanford University in order to create a sustainability college to study climate change and global warming issues. So these scenes should be familiar to you. In addition to what I just mentioned, last year in Buffalo, the snow amounted to 140 centimeters high, and the number of deaths amounted to more than 60 people. And after the earthquake in Turkey, in mid-February, there was flooding in mid-March, which caused 14 deaths in Turkey. So these unusual extreme climate phenomena have higher and higher frequency. In Taiwan, we often say a 100-year drought. For example, in central and southern Taiwan, there hasn't been any rainfall for some time. So all of these are caused by climate change. And maybe in the future, it's not impossible for Taiwan to reach 40 degrees Celsius. It will not only happen in Africa and in deserts, it may happen elsewhere as well. And in addition to the Buffalo's disaster, there will also be other issues. For example, the usage of plastics, which is talked about by the United Nations. And we can talk about biofuel, the usage of biofuel in this regard. In addition, new energy vehicles such as EVs and hydrogen cars in Japan, South Korea, and the US, we see that. And in Germany, in August last year, there were hydrogen trains available. So, what do we do with such a situation? Well, we have to face these challenges, and we follow government policies and net zero emission trends. Minister Gong, last year, National Development Council published the 2050 net zero emission pathway. And before that, CPC had put forward some net zero emission strategies. Basically, we can sum up our strategies as good oil and carbon reduction and clean energy, which I will elaborate on later. So we can see that there are so many countries embracing this initiative, and Taiwan is part of it. And the government has elevated the old laws and regulations, turning it into a new set of laws and regulations, showing that Taiwan embraces this universal value of net zero emission 2050. Last year, COP27 meetings were held. During the meetings, Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, said something. He said, "We are on a highway to climate hell." We are on a highway to climate hell. This is what he said. In addition, with our feet on the accelerator. So this is what he said during the COP27 meetings held in Egypt. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator. So this is the environment that we are facing. But last year, during the COP27, there were 4 takeaways, 4 historic agreements. As you can see, the establishment of loss and damage fund, and also not enough action to reduce fossil fuels, leading to disappointment. So already during COP27, people talked about the phasing out of fossil fuels, but it was not successful, and people just wanted to phase down, but not phase out completely. And third, the Ukrainian-Russian war has damaged forests, carbon sinks, and fourth, Brazil promised to stop deforestation by 2030. So we don't want to stay on this highway to climate hell. We don't want to stay on this highway anymore, and we don't want to have our foot on the accelerator. So different parties put forward different strategies, including Taiwan, just as I mentioned, as CPC. This year marks the 77th anniversary of CPC. Over the past 77 years, we have played the role of steadily supply oil and gas in our country. So our work starts from, as you can see, exploration, import of natural gas, and then refinery in Taiwan of oil and natural gas, and transportation, storage, and sale. CPC has always played such a role and made efforts in the steady supply of oil and natural gas. And faced with 2050 net zero emission pathway, we have to transform ourselves. I often tell our colleagues that CPC transformation prioritizes digitization. All our work items can be done through 5G and AIoT technologies, especially in our very traditional workplaces. We want to use digital technologies to lead our transformation. For example, on the production side, we can increase our production and our profits, and in terms of workplace safety and environmental protection, we can use digital tools, and also on the sale side, we can have more targeted sale with digital technologies. Let me give you one example. In our system maintenance in the past, we already had preventive maintenance in the past, but that was not enough. With 5G and AIoT, we can have we can predict even earlier the problems that will happen in the future, and we can put forward corresponding measures. Over the past 57 years, we have adopted digital transformation in all of these areas where we work, and this will lead to our overall transformation, which, as I said, is about good oil, carbon reduction, and clean energy. This is our slogan, and this is written in the DNA of all of our employees. Now, let me elaborate on such a strategy. Good oil, carbon reduction, and clean energy, there's a prioritization. Good oil is more near term, and clean energy is more for the long term. So there is a sequence between these two things. Good oil means that we optimize our oil products. In the past, we used oil as fuel, but in the future, we can create higher quality products to establish a material industry. So from fuel to material, this is our strategy. This is our direction. We will move towards high-end material industry and cooperate with, for example, the semiconductor, 5G, AIoT industries. Such applications have some initial results, but in the interest of time, I cannot give you more details today. So this is for good oil. COTC stands for crude oil to chemicals. Materials will be very important for our future direction and our carbon circular economy. And not just on production, we will also make efforts on our sales side, just as I said. We have 2,000 gasoline stations throughout Taiwan. We have we can start from the stations operated by ourselves. We already have 5 intelligent stations with charging services. So we can take this opportunity. We can use the heavy ends that exist as materials, as battery, negative electrode materials. We have soft carbon, and we also have LTO. So as for soft carbon, we are already starting these efforts, and this will complete in 2026. There will be 5,000 to 6,000 tons of soft carbon every year. And in the negative electrode, in graphene, it will be safer and it will last longer. This is our advantage. We have a cooperation project with Tainan City. So in Tainan City, we will work with the city government and with motorcycle companies to have a pilot there. Well, in the interest of time, I cannot really give you too many details. In terms of LTO, we will have some results this November. And in the future, our gasoline stations will become smart ones, all the way from, as you can see here on the storage, energy storage and energy management. Actually, we cooperate with Far East Tone on the system. So I'd like to thank them for their support. In energy storage, in addition to our soft carbon and LTO, CPC also have vanadium recycling to make electrolyte. We have our own materials, and this is similar to soft carbon. And this is our smart gasoline station. It will be diverse in the future. We now have 5 such stations. And in the future, there will be different forms of such service stations. Minister Gong talked about these different energy sources. And CPC is very strong in the exploration of these sources. We have a pilot project. We will capture and store about 300,000 tons of carbon. In the future, such capturing and storage can be done on the coastline, as you can see on the map. So once we capture carbon, we need to reuse the carbon or store the carbon. This is a plan that we are working on. At the end of last year, there was already a pilot equipment. This year, we are going to turn it into methanol so that we can reuse it. Well, the volume is about 60,000 tons of CO2, but we will have phase 2, phase 3. The volume will achieve 1 million tons of carbon dioxide. So about 2 years ago, I started to make requests. In the past, we only did investigations, but last year we finished some products. About 500 products can be completed this year. And after that, we will accelerate our carbon emission. And through ICP, we will have our pricing mechanism, internal carbon pricing mechanism. And we have reduced carbon, which amounts to 40 Dan parks in Taipei. So we will have a chance to to have some results by the end of this year. This is geothermal. We're still waiting for relevant regulations to be ready. I hope that 4 megawatts can be completed by the end of this year. Actually, 2 years ago, there was a 1 mega geothermal plant, and this year we will have a 4 mega plant. So the future is very promising in this regard. As for hydrogen, CPC will become a major supplier. Of course, there are blue and green hydrogen. For green hydrogen, we need to import. So this week, I had exchanges with several mayors from Queensland, Australia, because they have very good conditions. Their land is large and they have offshore wind turbines and they have solar panels in Australia. So it's very suitable to develop hydrogen energy. We hope that through such cooperation, the liquefied hydrogen can be transported to our reception stations. This can be a business model for green hydrogen for us in the future. We have also have some natural gas technologies, and through negative carbon technologies, it becomes usable. So we have blue and green hydrogen models that are both working, but the regulations and technologies are not mature enough currently. We hope that in addition to industrial usage, it can also be used on vehicles. By 2050, there can be significant volumes. We want to continue to optimize such hydrogen stations in the future. Well, due to time constraints, I have to speed up. Over the past 77 years, we have been supported by different stakeholders, and we have always insisted ESG. We have always valued such principles. In the future, we will continue to work with these stakeholders. We will continue to emphasize good oil, carbon reduction, and clean energy and relevant action plans. We will take the lead and guide other companies in both public and private sectors. CPC Corporation is a driver for Taiwan's energy transformation. We, in the past, well, in the future, CPC will become a green power company. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Lee, for your presentation. We'll hear from Mr. Lee again in the summit after the presentations. Our next speaker is Chief Administration Officer Wang Du-chun from ASE Group. Now, in recent years, net zero carbon emissions and carbon neutrality have become hot topics for businesses. Companies that do not adopt ESG practices may be affected. So how does the ASE Group plan to respond to this trend? Please join us as Mr. Wang shares his insights. Mr. Liang, Chairman Lee, Ms. Zhao, Ms. Jing, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. So I actually have a few jokes to share. Now, I saw in the video clip the vision shaped by 10 mayors. Now, I feel very humbled, and ASE Group, we are pretty big in Taiwan, and we have presence in 6 of these 10 cities and counties. And all these mayors, especially the Kaohsiung mayor, mentioned that we cannot leave anyone behind. So that puts a lot of pressure on me. We have a very big site in Kaohsiung. So that means that we have to work even harder. ASE of course, needs to cut carbon emissions, and all these pressure is not just coming from multinational companies that are our clients, but also regulatory requirements from governments. So there's really a lot of hard work, and I think that the whole capitalist structure will also see some changes given the current sustainability trend. Now, of course, ASE is a profitable business, and we also provide very good EPS to our shareholders, and I believe that our EPS will hit a new high this year. So now we have to think about how to cut our carbon emissions, and if we price in the costs, then ASE could go bankrupt if you really take into account every cost. So we have to think about how to cut carbon emissions, but it can be very costly. Now, our traditional approach, the traditional capitalist approach, is to maximize investor benefits. But now, as we push for net zero and sustainability, we also have to take into account other factors. I think just now, Chairman Lee talked about the crisis brought by climate change. I actually live in Xizhi, not far from here. And last year, it rained for more than 300 days in Xizhi. I had no idea what there was. And then I heard that there was an agricultural project being implemented in Xizhi. And I was told that it actually rained for more than 300 days in Xizhi. So from where I live, I can see that the climate pattern is changing. Maybe in the future, there will be a drought. Who knows? So from all these small events, we can see the kind of challenges that we are facing. So as we try to cut carbon emissions, there will be changes in our company as well. And we also need a sustainability culture to take root within our company. Otherwise, we cannot achieve our net zero target. So it's very important for us to incorporate this philosophy into the running of our company. ASE is, of course, at the forefront of this action, and this creates a lot of pressure on us. So just very quickly, you can see that ASE has a very high revenue. We have about 90,000 employees, and our revenue last year was about 700 billion. And we have good margin, but otherwise, I mean, obviously, perhaps not as good as TSMC. But anyway, I think for a manufacturing company, the industry where we're in, semiconductor, packaging, and testing, I think this is a very good industry. And I think gradually the packaging and testing industry will probably become even more dominant than foundries. So I think that this section of the semiconductor industry will play an increasingly important role. So just very quickly, we have changed our organizational chart in order to push for sustainability. And we have several subsidiaries within our group. We have ASE, SPIL, and USI. So here you can see that we already have the top management buy-in. So that shows that we already have support from the highest level of the company. And in the subsidiaries, their CEO will be sitting in their Sustainable Development Committee. So as we talk about the net zero goal, of course, the net zero goal is only part of the story. We want our company to be sustainable. That means that we need to have resilience. If a company cannot survive, then any strategy is not going to be helpful. So, of course, we need to try to cut our carbon emissions, and we also have to take into account other stakeholders as well. I think worldwide, the consensus is that a company also has to think about the society at large. That's what makes a company meaningful. So we have to think about low carbon technology, we have to think about a circular economy model, and we also have to work with our supply chain. So it's more than about our own company. We need to be able to influence our partners in the supply chain, and we also have to benefit society at large. We need to use our capabilities to try to benefit society. So this is also part of our sustainability strategy. And as you can see on this slide, there are 4 areas in our strategy. And we recently also set up a social enterprise, which I am the head of. So this year, we in fact have a large-scale project, and we hope that through this social enterprise, we can create a carbon sink. And we want to develop a carbon sink methodology for Taiwan. We already invested 5 million Taiwan dollars to develop a methodology, and this way we can make calculations as to how much carbon is being stored or sequestered. And we also hope to be able to punch above our weight. Now, if the forests in Taiwan cannot be used as carbon sink, I think that would really be a shame, because a very large part of Taiwan is covered by trees. And also, we want to be able to influence others. And I think, again, we want to create positive change. We want to have positive influence. So, of course, our supply chain is very important. And we may not have extremely advanced technology, but our supply chain is pretty big. So the supply chain transition is very important as well. Now, regarding the science-based targets initiative, we are already setting reduction goals. 2 years ago, we already set our short-term goals. Our long-term goals are for 2050. We want to achieve net zero, and this year we apply to have our goals reviewed by SBTi. Now, of course, the whole world is paying attention to the so-called greenwashing issue. So we have been very cautious, and for 7 years in a row, we have received the top score by Dow Jones in the semiconductor industry. So we have to be very cautious. We need to have feasible plans. And it's because of our cautious approach that we've been recognized by Dow Jones. And we have short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. I'll talk about them later. But by 2030, in terms of absolute emissions, we have to cut by 35%. And our goals have been reviewed by SBTi, and in the long term, we want to reach net zero, so that's 2050. Now, I will be retired by then, but currently we are not yet very confident that we can achieve that 2050 goal. It's just that now we already have the target. So we've already reviewed the feasible technologies available now, and we feel that there is a chance that we can achieve net zero, this long-term goal. And this is why we came up with this target this year. And we also have to evaluate our own impact on the climate. So we issued a TCFD report, and this is a way for us to tell the whole world what we are doing to tackle climate change. And in the report, you'll see our methodology, you'll see how we mitigate risks. And to put it more bluntly, we are really making us completely transparent. So in the TCFD report, you'll see our evaluation. Now, in other countries, if you provide false information in the TCFD report, then you'll be criminally liable. So we were also very cautious as we wrote up the report. And we also need to evaluate our products. We also need to have a life cycle assessment of our products. And we have, regarding our 5 major products, we've already completed the life cycle assessment, LCA. And this will help us cut carbon emissions. So from the materials that we used all the way through the end of life, we can identify the hotspots of carbon emissions. And with this information, we'll be able to address the pain points, and we can also find alternative materials that will help us move towards our goal. And in fact, last year, in our LCA, with the data that we now have, we can probably cut resource use by 35%. And in terms of supplier engagement, we hope to be able to work with our partners. And so we have a low carbon energy project, and we encourage suppliers to participate in the project. So basically, this is one of the ways for us to encourage suppliers to move towards low carbon energy. But obviously, perhaps they don't have a choice. But anyway, sustainability is already part of our DNA, so we have to work on all these areas. And we also ask suppliers to take inventory of their carbon footprints. Now, you see, at ASE, we have to comply with many requirements, but we also have to help the smaller suppliers to try to move towards low carbon and sustainability. We understand that for certain suppliers, this may be difficult. This is why we are here to help them. And in 2025, in all our major supply chains, the carbon footprint verification will be completed. We, in fact, have invested a lot in this area. And in terms of customer engagement, we have to think about how to talk to our customers about renewable energy and clean production. And I think in these areas, we really have to work with our customers. You see, well, I don't know whether I'm running out of time because I can't really see any reminders. Right, so I talked about net zero emissions, and we already set very concrete steps in order to achieve 2050 net zero. And in terms of carbon pricing, of course, it's a very important tool. At ASE, we already have an internal carbon pricing tool, but of course the methodology is quite complex. We hope that by 2025, 82% of our global factories will implement an internal carbon pricing model. But as I mentioned earlier, of course, this will create a lot of impact. And one of our factories already have this ICP internal carbon pricing. Now, so per ton of emission, the price for them is set at 1,245, and it's the factory with the least carbon emissions, and the price is already this high. So with this ICP in place, we are also going to set up a carbon fund within the company in order to push for net zero. So internally, we already have this tool in place, and it's in line with international standards. We also have 5 major net zero strategies. Now, so Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are something that we can control, but Scope 3 emissions are more complex because it's about the supply chain. And in the manufacturing process, we are working very hard to cut carbon emissions. In 2021, in fact, we saved 70 million kilowatt hours of electricity just through our initiative. And we are also purchasing green energy. But of course, there's more that has to be done, and we need to purchase more green energy. I also want to share with you what we are doing in other areas. I talked about the forest carbon sink, so we've invested in the research of methodology. And in the area of renewable energy and low carbon energy, we are also working very hard. So we are constantly seeking opportunities to buy green energy. We also use big data analysis. Now, within our company, we have a very professional big data team, and it has about 600 members. So they are working on automated factories and the technologies. So we develop our own software. And we are also the very first company in our industry to receive the Green Factory certification. In fact, after 2016, the factories built after 2016 are all green buildings. And one of the buildings is also certified diamond level. We have also received the Beacon Factory certification. So you can see that we are really working very hard to achieve our goals. And in terms of R&D, I think I only have 1 minute left. So low carbon products, for us, it's about using less energy and also innovate. Innovation is also very important. So 5 years ago, we saw that low carbon products will be the future. So we are also working with our suppliers and our customers. So there's some kind of integration. And we hope to be able to find an area of potential. And at ASE, what was very successful for us was that we used copper wires. So that was very helpful for us. And that also meant that we could increase our revenue. So now, what are we going to do? So people have been talking about SiP and so on. For us, the SiP is already a very mature technology. We've been working on it for years. So SiP, it can cut energy consumption by over 35%. So low carbon products can be very economical, and it will also help reduce Scope 1 emissions. So that's what we want to do. Right, so another area where we are working very hard is social welfare. So we spend about 100 million a year on social welfare projects. So we have a foundation, and we hope to be able to give back to society. And it's not just about giving back, in fact. It's about prospering with society together and also address environmental issues. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for your insightful presentation, and we look forward to more sharing from you later in the summit. Now, I'd like to welcome General Manager Ms. Zhao Shuming from JNV. Green energy is not only a global trend, but also brings significant business opportunities. So what are Taiwan's advantages and progress in green energy? As the leading integrated green energy investment group in Taiwan, what solutions does JNV Energy Technology offer? Now let's welcome her. Distinguished guests, participants on site and online, good afternoon. I'm Zhao Shuming, General Manager from JNV Energy Technology. I feel pressured after Mr. Wang because his presentation was really interesting. I know that most of you know about CPC and ASE, but you may not know what JNV does. So I want to share with you what kind of a role that our company has played and what have we done, and also our future prospects. Now let me show you some numbers. We work on renewable energy. One important aspect of carbon reduction is the usage of renewable energy. It can be purchasing green power or installing solar panels. So this is a very important aspect of carbon reduction and energy saving. We have been asked to do things. So this is the global trends. For example, as you can see, 2030, this much solar energy and wind energy. We still need to use power. So where does such electricity come from? We can only increase renewable energy. And in 2022, the increase is 268 gigawatts, and in 2023, the number amounts to 315. And in Taiwan, our goal is 2050 net zero. We have mentioned the pathway. Minister Gong mentioned net zero emission pathway 2050. What is exactly the pathway for Taiwan? Let me show you this. You may have heard about the numbers, but this is really the table. As you can see here, renewable energy needs to achieve 60 to 70%, which means that by 2050, in order to achieve net zero, we need to have 60 to 70% of renewable energy. And here, 9 to 12% of hydrogen and EVs are also here. All the buses will have to be electric. So you know what is the percentage now as of last year, renewable energy? Less than 10%. This number is from 2021. The number was 6 to 7% only. So these goals are very far away from us, but let's turn them into more concrete goals. In order to achieve net zero by 2050, we need to have 60 to 70% of renewable energy. And the government has set up some goals. For example, solar, by 2025, we want to achieve 20 gigawatts, by 2030, 31 gigawatts, and by 2050, between 40 to 80 gigawatts, including offshore wind and energy storage. Then by doing all of these, then we will be able to achieve 60 to 70% of renewable energy. So what we do is to develop renewable energy. We are a bit different from the previous two speakers. Our approaches are different because I'm sure that this is the responsibility of everyone. For example, when you buy something to drink, we don't want to use one of straw, one of chopsticks anymore, and we turn off light when we don't need it. So everyone takes some actions, but you may not combine these two things together. You do these things because you want to pay less for your electricity bill. People think about things this way, but every action can help save energy and reduce carbon. Enterprises are asked to do these things a lot. So in our company, we are an integrated integration service company, and we are a pioneer in this industry. We were established in 2016. We have only done one thing so far. We have worked on renewable energy. We started from solar power. We started with solar projects, and nowadays we work on offshore wind and also energy storage. You mentioned the purchase of green power so that you can, so we have a platform, power sale platform, and water processing is also something we do. We mentioned drought in southern Taiwan, which is very serious. And 2 years ago, there was a in 400 years drought. So there have been more frequent shortage of water resources. This will become more commonplace. This year, there hasn't been any typhoon, and over the past decade, there have been fewer and fewer typhoons. When I was a child, every summer vacation there were 2 to 3 typhoon holidays because of typhoons. But nowadays there have been fewer and fewer. You may feel that these are once every 100-year disaster, but these extreme weather conditions have become more common. So we work on water processing. We also work on bioenergy. How do we do these things? Well, we have existed for 7 years, which is relatively short. If we develop all of these technologies, then 7 years is not enough. So we adopt the Berkshire approach. We acquire and integrate resources in order to expand our businesses more rapidly. In the interest of time, I will skip this part. I just want you to know that starting from 2016, we have challenged ourselves with different models, rooftop, ground-mounted renewable energy forms. And not just in Taiwan, we have cooperated with foreign companies because renewable energy requires a lot of capital. We have established offshore wind Taiwan team, and we have worked on water processing, water treatment. So we want to reduce costs so that when people walk on this path of net zero, we can spend less. This echoes what was said. If we want to work on green sustainability, we may end up losing money. So it's important to reduce cost. Now I want you to look at our progress in each and every area. I want to share with you our achievements. This is 500 megawatt. Remember the number I just mentioned, 20 gigawatts by 2050. So this is still very far. 1,000 megawatts is 1 gigawatt for your information. This is a flagship project of ours. Well, in Taiwan, there is a lot of agricultural land, so we have to get land from farmers. But in this case, these two industries can coexist. There's a fishery here and aquaculture, and at the same time, the ecosystem can be maintained. We can coexist with the fishers. This way, renewable energy requires more installed capacity in order to achieve net zero and energy transition. Right now, this cannot be done because international supply chains require RE10, RE100. Many Taiwanese companies, including TSMC, promise RE100 by 2030, if I remember correctly. So all these enterprises have their own tempo and their plans. What we can do is that we increase such sites so that enterprises can purchase green electricity, more electricity to use. I have a short video clip to play. Let's have a look at the construction. I hope that you don't fall asleep after lunch. And this is a 170-hectare site. So this shows how we communicated with fishers and in order to complete this site. I think more often you see completed sites, but you didn't realize that the process is quite challenging. Okay. When you watch this video, you see a lot of manual work. So this creates a lot of job opportunities. One problem that we face with that there was a shortage of manpower and workers. So we always are curious about the unemployment rate because we need a lot of people, but we couldn't find them. And not just solar, but also offshore wind. We emphasize the cultivation of talent and the training and also the creation of job opportunities in Taiwan. I'm sure that this is a new area, and we believe that if we develop well, there will be great opportunities. In this industry, I see 2050 already this far, and this will be a irreversible trend of the future. This is another site. This is also a hybrid system of fishery and power generation, but the one we just saw was in the open air, and this one is indoors. In this type of system, the aqua farming is more the fish are of a higher value, and we cooperated with the information industry agency on this project. And the problem we faced was that no young people were willing to return to their hometown to work on aquaculture because they thought that this is tough and tiring jobs. This requires a lot of experience accumulation, but through such hybrid and intelligent systems, we can use sensors and high technology to detect water quality changes before we do something to control the water quality. So all of these can be done in an intelligent way. In the past, one person needed to take care of 10 ponds, and now one person can look at 50 ponds because thanks to such digital and data tools. This is something the government has been promoting, smart aquaculture, so that young people are more willing to return to their hometown. Renewable energy is new, but it can be combined and integrated with conventional and traditional industries. These are some projects that we have done, and this is a filling field, and it takes 30 to 50 years for the garbage to degrade. But now we can install solar panels on it, and they will last for 20 to 30 years. And after that, the land can be reused. So the government has been exploring different possibilities and different sites to have more renewable energy. And you can see that some panels are installed on flood retention ponds and other places, as you can see on the slide. Now let's take a look at energy storage. You may be less familiar with this, but with renewable energy, which is very different from coal-fired power generation, the sun and wind are intermittent, and they are affected by weather conditions. At night, there is no sun, so you need other power generation. When the weather is not good, suddenly, then we need to have backup power generation. When the weather is cloudy, we need to have backup plans. What I'm trying to say is that there are many different factors, not just renewable energy, but renewable energy sources are intermittent, so the power grid becomes less stable, which needs to be supported by energy storage. So we need batteries. We need batteries to help us store energy. just like how your power banks work for your mobile phones. When suddenly power supply goes down, we need energy storage to support it. And when there's an oversupply, batteries can also help store such energy. So these on the market, on the Taiwan power market, Taiwan Power wants to build power plants, and we also have some new power plants, and we work on all of these different projects. Power grid needs to have energy storage in order to be stable, and only by doing so can renewable energy makes more sense. In Yilan County, we have a 100 megawatt project which we are working on, and this is more relevant to you. We cooperate with Family Mart. In the past, there were problems of power outages, and then in convenience stores there was UPS systems, but now we can use energy storage to replace that, and you can have different sizes because UPS systems or power generators are relatively larger that have to be shared with an entire building. You only get a small share in your apartment of your store, but through energy storage, you can make better use of the electricity, and you can maintain power supply for the entire apartment or entire store. So there are different sizes of energy storage that can be used throughout Taiwan, and this is electricity sale platform. Well, in order to achieve RE100, many people buy green power, or many people purchase certificates. So we have established this company, this platform. Well, Google, Micron have had many cooperations with us buying our electricity. The advantage is that, well, remember, we have built many power plants, so when they come to us, I can quickly tell them that we have this much electricity that can be sold to you. We don't need to look for power sources. This is one great advantage of cooperating with us. Now we can take a look at offshore wind. This is something that our government has paid a lot of attention to. One advantage of offshore wind is that Taiwan has great offshore wind resources. Taiwan ranks among the top 20 wind fields. Well, Taiwan has 15 such places. So there are different objectives that have been established. JMV has participated in phase 3. In phase 1 and 2, there were all foreign companies. But in phase 3, we have joined phase 3, and we have been allocated some capacity. This year and next year, there will be bids for tender. We want to continue to develop in this area in order to create more green electricity and cultivate more talent in these areas. And this is water treatment that I just mentioned. This company has existed for 40 years, and we have merged and acquired them in order to cooperate with them. One thing they do is to we want to make use of seawater, and also, so this is very important for our future because the government has been preparing for this, because over the next 2 years there will be more and more such projects of making use of seawater. So in the future, by investing in this company, we want to use bio energy. Well, I'm speeding up because of time limits. In this process, JNV emphasizes renewable energy and circular economy. In order to achieve 2050 net zero emission pathway, I have said that what we do is exactly ESG, but we don't feel that we don't need to do other things. We also have a basketball team, so we continue to contribute to the society in different ways. We want to continue to build more power plants and reduce costs so that people can buy green electricity with lower prices. In the future, we hope that we can, well, as I mentioned, there are other renewable energies that we can work on. For example, geothermal energy, just as CPC just said, and also small hydropower, hydrogen, carbon management. These are all our future key areas. We want to play the role of a driver for 2050 net zero. We want to help enterprises achieve RE100 and net zero emission. We want to go out of Taiwan rather than staying in Taiwan. We want to go to, for example, Southeast Asia to share our talent and learnings abroad so that everyone can achieve 2050 net zero emission. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zhao, for your presentation. Please be seated. Again, a big thank you to our three speakers today for their engaging presentations. I was told by the staff member that over 2,000 people are watching the live streaming. So it shows that many people are already paying attention to the issue of sustainability. And of course, sustainability is a key trend that companies around the world have to pay attention to. I believe that all of us have learned a lot from the three presentations. And as you can see, we have chairs on the stage, so that means that we are going to proceed to the summit. So now I'd like to invite Chairman Li, Mr. Wang, and Ms. Zhao, as well as CEO Liang Baohua, onto the stage. We're going to kick off the summit in a minute. And before we start today's summit, I also want to ask my colleague, Xu Qiwen from USTV, onto the stage. She'll be the moderator, and we'll have a group photo first. So once again, please remove your masks for the photo. Okay, are you ready for the photo? Good. Thumbs up for a second photo. Thank you very much. Again, a round of applause for our panelists. Okay, I'll give the microphone to Xu Qiwen. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Xu Qiwen, an anchor from USTV. I'm really very happy to be here. I learned a lot from the three speakers. So right now, we already have more than 2,000 people watching the live streaming. In fact, in total, 2,000 people, because we have a Chinese language live streaming and an English language live streaming. So in the summit, we're going to talk about sustainability and energy transition. In the face of the challenges brought by climate change, the net zero goal in 2050 is something that many people have been discussing, and also the EU is going to implement a carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM, later this year. And previously, speakers also talked about RE100 requirements. And in Taiwan, we recently passed the Climate Change Response Act and drafted the Net Zero Emission Pathway 2023 to 2026 outline plan. So that means both domestic and international carbon taxes and fees are being implemented. So how can businesses control their costs and maintain competitiveness? So this is a key issue that we are going to discuss today. So first of all, I'd like to ask Mr. Li Shunqing from CPC Corporation. So previously you mentioned the importance of inventory taking in terms of carbon emissions. But a very big challenge in Taiwan is that we have many SMEs and they don't have that many resources. So it might be very difficult for them to understand their emissions, and this will be an additional cost for them. And Mr. Li, you mentioned that the carbon footprint inventory taking actually covers over 100 items. Perhaps you can talk to us about it. Thank you. In fact, the CBAM policy was announced very early. And we also have a C-Bank. And after the C-Bank was passed, our company has been making preparations. We took inventory of our own Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So for us, that's more than 11 million tons. And we also have our 2021 data, so that's about 7.6 million tons. So that's just our company. We have been cutting carbon emissions, but I feel that sometimes maybe the momentum is still not strong enough. We have 8 business units, and we want all the business units to take carbon reduction very seriously. So we did cut our carbon emissions. So the previous figure was over 7.6 million. And I looked at a German company. They spent more than 10 years taking inventory of the carbon emissions of 40,000 products. But in our company, we only have 500 products or so. Now, previously, we had a lot more products. But in terms of the major products, we basically provide petrochemical products. And we also have we also have fuels. These are our key products. So I mentioned that we have a lot of business units, and I want them to take carbon emissions seriously. So carbon reduction is part of our performance evaluation. This is why ICP, internal carbon pricing, is important. But how do you set the prices? The range can be high, or towards the high end, or towards the low end. I know that Delta, in fact, set their internal carbon price very high, probably the highest in Taiwan. I remember it's over 20,000 per ton. So that's their strategy. So I understand that among our peers, the ICP range is usually around 1,000 to 1,500 per ton. So of course we have to take inventory of our emissions. And we also have to see which unit is doing more to reduce carbon emissions. So we want an ICP. And in Taiwan, there are also certification bodies that can help us in our inventory taking. So last year we completed the inventory taking on 21 items, and this year we've done even more. And then we'll implement the ICP system in order to provide incentives for the business units to cut carbon emissions. Right, so it sounds like you are using performance evaluation to provide incentives, and you also have other accompanying measures. Okay, my next question is for Mr. Wang from ASE Group. So Taiwanese companies, of course, face a lot of challenges. If you work with international companies, then you understand that many regulations are very complex and very stringent as well. So we talked about carbon reduction. So perhaps it's very difficult to achieve this overnight, but maybe we can also try to recycle our emissions, or we can also do a carbon credit trading. Perhaps these other approaches can work too. Thank you for your question. So I think I can only speak from my own experience, which is within our company. I think it's a very good question. At ASE, I think it's almost impossible to achieve zero emission. At CPC and JMV, even if they can provide very cheap renewable energy, that will only help us reduce Scope 2 emissions. But in terms of the manufacturing process, especially in the semiconductor industry, we in fact consume a lot of energy. So I guess I'm a bit embarrassed to say so, but in terms of the electricity that we use, so us and TSMC, we probably use quite a sizable chunk of the energy generated in Taiwan. And almost all the energy is used in our facilities, so that also has to do with our Scope 1 emissions. So I think it's practically impossible for us to achieve zero emissions. And this is why we have to think about other approaches, for example, a carbon sink and so on. We use this to offset carbon emissions. But of course, you mentioned international regulations. They are indeed very stringent. And so we have to think about how to achieve zero emissions in our manufacturing process. Now, Mr. Lee mentioned earlier that they have to understand the life cycle of their products and think about how to reduce emissions, and he also talked about preventive maintenance. And by doing so, you can actually save a lot of energy. So you probably don't know that if something doesn't work in a factory, that the amount of energy that can be consumed is incredible. So we use a big data analysis system, and we use this system to predict possible problems in our equipment. So before the actual failure happens, we can already replace the equipment. And this helps us save energy. So again, this is to enhance our energy efficiency. But however much you do, I think it's very difficult to achieve zero emissions. And the reason why we set out the 2050 net zero goal is that we feel that we can also try out carbon capture. So we do emit carbon, but we have to capture the carbon emissions. That means that we'll be able to have a clean factory, and this way we can probably address scope 1 emissions. Well, I think maybe Mr. Li and Ms. Zhao think that it's not practical. Well, in fact, carbon capturing is very difficult, and even if you can capture the emissions, where are you going to store the carbon emissions? That's another issue. So I know that some companies promise that they'll use 100% renewable energy by 2030. I really have a lot of admiration for these companies because I think they are extremely courageous. But again, we need to find solutions to these problems. I think carbon offsetting is a very good approach. So there are certain technical problems for us, but perhaps we can find other ways to reduce our carbon emissions. So I think basically we want to try to strike a balance. So I think offsetting can be an approach. Well, I think in the semiconductor industry, we haven't yet faced a carbon border tax issue. But of course, we have to consider all these carbon tax issues. Well, I understand the EU is going to implement the CBAM policy, and this will create a challenge for us. And I understand that Mr. Li and Ms. Zhao are experts in this area, and I'm sure that their companies can help us.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. You mentioned big data and its usage in carbon reduction, and also you mentioned carbon capture. So I want to ask Ms. Zhao from JMV Energy Technology. One difficulty which was mentioned is about the supply of renewable energy. Many enterprises want to buy green electricity, but the supply is not stable, and affordability is another issue. So these two problems are paid attention to a lot by enterprises. We know that you have a sale platform, so is the supply enough, and will the prices be more affordable to the market? Well, I have to be very honest with you. Right now, green electricity now is in shortage of supply compared to demand, because our renewable energy started around 2016 only, and at the beginning it was very slow. Over the past 2 years, the growth has accelerated. But let me tell you this. I mentioned 2025 with 20% of renewable energy. This is a goal set up by the government, but 2 months ago, it became 15% by 2025. Can we achieve 15% by 2025? Well, we need to have 20 gigawatt of solar energy in order to achieve 20% of renewable energy. But last year, there was only 10 gigawatt, and it was cumulative. And over the next 3 years, we have to have another 10 gigawatts. So the goal seems a bit far. And as for offshore, 5.5 gigawatt by 2025. But right now, there's only, less than 1 gigawatt. We know that there's a lot of delay recently because of COVID and other reasons. So a lot of professionals could not come to Taiwan. So the supply of green electricity is not sufficient, and Thai Power has FIT policy. Right now, 1 kilowatt hour is 5 NT dollars, but the cost is only 2 to 3 NT dollars from Thai Power. At night, it's even cheaper. So this is a question of cost. If I want to buy green electricity, the cost will increase. Of course, there will be improvement in the future when the volume increases. And in terms of offshore wind power in phase 3 for 2026 and 2027, Thai Power doesn't offer FIT. So the solar power can be sold to Thai Power with 4 to 5 NT dollars. But starting from 2026, the bidding price will be zero, which means that Thai Power won't need to buy from you. So your electricity, if you have noticed this news, TSMC purchased phase 2 CIP 900 megawatts of electricity. All of it was purchased by TSMC because they needed this much of electricity. A lot of people have told you that they wanted to buy until 2025 because they felt that starting from 2026, there will be a lot of offshore electricity integrated with the power grid, so the supply would be more sufficient by then. So before that, they need to buy some green electricity due to requests from their clients abroad. But starting from before 2025, they still need to consider their cost and profitability. So I'm sure that the structure will change, but the change depends on the development and the speed of development of our renewable energy. When there's more supply, then I believe that the prices will become more and more competitive. But at this moment, I have to tell you that right now, most buyers are large enterprises and banks because banks have ESG requirements. In terms of SMEs, it's difficult for them to buy green electricity because the prices cannot be as competitive for them. For large enterprises, they have to spend such money in order not to lose orders from abroad. So they have more capital to buy green electricity. I'm sure that there will be improvements in the future. Thank you, Ms. Zhao. We can only expect that the integration with power grid of renewable energy can be faster. Now a question for Mr. CEO Liang. When based on your years of experience, how can we tackle such challenges? Mr. Wang just mentioned this. In order to, if they really want to achieve net zero, ASE may go bankrupt. So it can only be done in a step-by-step way. When Taiwan works on net zero emission, I can share with you some conclusions from the morning session. First of all, there is more and more external pressure. For example, in 2015, the United Nations formulated 2030 SDGs, and even earlier on, a lot of enterprises talked about this already. And right now, the European Union's CBAM mechanism was passed last June, and starting from this October, there will be pilots, and in 2027, it will be complete implementation. So they spend a lot of efforts and costs trying to reduce carbon. So if you want to sell your products there, you need to pay this cost so that there can be a level playing field. across the world. We have to also pay attention to the US. On June 7th last year, they passed a CCA, Clean Competition Act, and it was even stricter than the European Union. They use the aviation industry's standards as the standards for around the world. So they wanted to set up the rules for the entire world. ASE Group has a large client. TSMC has Apple as their major client. So these clients ask Taiwanese companies and their supply chains to fulfill these requirements and goals. This is why TSMC has bought so many green electricity certificates. So, as I said, external pressure is increasing. Our major enterprises in Taiwan have started to work on Tier 1, 2, and 3, and their supply chains have to follow suit. I think in Taiwan, the major problem is in our SMEs. The government needs to provide a lot of subsidy for these SMEs in order for them to achieve the requirements. And ASE's supply chain, for example, needs to do that. But they're lucky to be part of ASE's supply chain. If they don't have international client, if a company doesn't have an international client, then they cannot afford to pay green electricity. FSE and the government have done a lot of things. For example, ESG and financial tools and the securities and future Bureau have done a lot of things, but that's limited to the financial industry. That's limited to listed companies, which are about 1,800, but we have 500,000 of SMEs in Taiwan. They really suffer from a lot of pressure. It's impossible for them to immediately achieve this target. They can only do this in a step-by-step way with guidance. I think this is something that the government can still do. For example, the supply of electricity. The Ministry of Economic Affairs is using energy transition to transform industries, which leads to lifestyle transformation. Energy transition, for example, 2025, non-nuclear homeland, there's immediate pressure. Do we have enough electricity without nuclear power to support our 1% GDP growth? Our electricity may be insufficient. Okay, we want to develop solar and wind energy. We want to introduce foreign companies to help us. And many of our enterprises are going into this direction. And we hope that technologies can be transferred from these foreign companies. But for some high-polluting industries, they may be gradually eliminated. The Ministry of Economic Affairs is using energy transition to transform our industries. But what about petrochemical industry, CPC? This is challenging for CPC. And also, the development of hydrogen suffers from a lot of pressure. I think Japan is doing a good job in hydrogen development. I think there are some cooperations between CPC and Japan. What I'm trying to say is that all our enterprises are facing this challenge. We have to do these, whether or not we want them to do. If we don't go into this direction, we get crowded out by our foreign clients. So, but we at the same time can only do this with a cost that we can afford. So this is a balance to strike. I think for SMEs, they have to be conscious of this balance so that they can achieve this goal. Thank you, Mr. Liang. You mentioned the supply chain. Well, for enterprises to go sustainable, all the supply chains need to work together. Today, we have participants and representatives from different industries. So how do you play the role of a leader in your industry to guide the entire supply chains? Well, there are 3 research institutions in CPC. For example, in your presentation, you mentioned LTO technology. Can you share with us more about this? Well, thank you. CPC focuses on transformation, digital transformation. Another important thing is that we want to use R&D to guide our transformation. We have 3 research institutions in CPC, which is our great advantage. I have a recommendation to make. You talked about green electricity being purchased almost entirely by TSMC, and for Apple, CPC, well, there are some companies that need to achieve RE100. 2 years ago, we started to import carbon-neutral natural gas because of this. And then TSMC, 2 years ago, purchased a cargo of carbon-neutral natural gas, which amounted to 60,000 tons. The emission was about 200,000 tons. So, starting from 2 years ago, CPC started to introduce such natural gas, carbon-neutral crude oil and natural gas, in order for our companies to achieve net zero earlier. These are recognized globally, even though they are not recognized yet by our Environmental Protection Agency. This is very important. So before answering the question, I just wanted to respond to what he said.
I think, well, we import oil, we also import gas, and then we make many different products out of these raw materials. So we have to work on our R&D in order to optimize our products. We have 3 research institutes in our company, and they all do different work. So I think one of our institutes really excels in CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So we have oil, which is extracted from oil well, and we also need to work on what follows. In fact, in our booth, you can also take a look at our CCUS technology. We have one institute in Kaohsiung, another one in Jiayi. And I think in energy storage, both institutes have already achieved some results. Now, because of time constraint, I was not able to share with you the information in this area in my presentation, but previous speakers also mentioned that energy storage is very important. Otherwise, your grid will not be able to withstand all these new additions. So I mentioned that we have 3 research institutes. So we've been working on LTO. We also work on soft carbon. So we have our own materials, we have our own technologies. So these are our advantages. And also V2O5, vanadium products are important for us. So we also use catalysts, and we have precious metal in our catalysts. We can recycle them and use them in our energy storage systems. And in fact, we have many visitors to our institutes, and there you can see a demonstration of our energy storage technologies. Of course, there are different types of energy storage equipment. Certain equipment is big, but others are small in scale. Our three institutes are working together, but they also compete with each other. So they have different commercial models. And going forward, we're also going to work on community microgrids. Our petrol stations can become some kind of hubs. So let me give you a very simple example. So we can have 1 megawatt energy storage system in our petrol station. Let's say if a household uses 360 kilowatt hours of electricity per month. If I have a storage system that is 1 megawatt in capacity, then you see 1 megawatt can supply electricity for 2,500 families. So we want to have smart technology. We also want to integrate the smart technology with community microgrids, and that's what we've been working on. And previously, Mr. Liang also mentioned that the Minister of the National Development Council actually tasked us with the provision of hydrogen. But of course, it's very difficult. But our institutes have been working on this. In fact, 2 years ago, we set up a carbon neutral task force, and the task force was upgraded last year into a climate change response task force. And under that task force, there's a hydrogen unit. And some of the people in the unit actually came from the institutes. So hydrogen is actually very difficult to develop. Now, Kawasaki built a small cargo vessel. So Kawasaki of Japan built such a cargo ship. And they also have a liquefied hydrogen tank. So they sailed from Kobe in Japan to Victoria in Australia. So the idea was to transport hydrogen from Australia to Japan. And it's called a hydrogen supply chain project. So they spent many years working on this. And the hydrogen we're talking about is not green hydrogen. It's partially gasified hydrogen. So it's not green hydrogen. And basically, this is about hydrogen transportation. So you need a very low temperature to liquefy the hydrogen. It has to be minus 160 degrees Celsius. So you need to transport the liquefied form. And then when you want to use the hydrogen, you have to turn the liquefied form into a gasified form. So what's the difficulty in this, you might ask? Now, I said that liquefied hydrogen, that's minus 160 degrees. Gasified, minus 253 degrees. Right? So that means that you want to turn gasified hydrogen into liquefied hydrogen. It's very difficult. But you have to do this in order to transport the hydrogen all the way to Taiwan. So if you want to develop hydrogen power, then you need to be able to master the liquefaction technology. Now, LNG cargoes, such cargo vessels. Now, I said that Japan only built a very small vessel, and that's an experimental vessel. So we need all these different technologies to reach some kind of maturity. Of course, you also have to think about what kind of material you have to use in order to build such a cargo ship. So there are so many things to do. The U.S. hopes to reduce the cost of green hydrogen from $5 to $1. Now, of course, we really look forward to it, but it's very difficult. Now, I mentioned that we have different strategies. We want to have good oil products. We want to have good technologies. But currently, all these new technologies are very costly. You have to capture 1 ton. Let's say if you capture 1 ton of carbon emissions and then you want to change it into something useful, it's very costly. Now, hydrogen power will be something that will keep us going in the future. So we want to achieve zero emission. And to do that, you need hydrogen power. But again, you need mature technologies. When the technologies are mature, then the business model can be built. Now, of course, there were previous success models. Like PV used to be very expensive, but now it's a lot cheaper. So hydrogen is difficult, but we still have to do it. Thank you, Mr. Li. Hydrogen power is very important. So we've been talking about carbon neutral products, and you also talk about small grid. My next question is for Mr. Wang from ASE. Now, ASE, of course, is a leader in semiconductor packaging and testing, and the semiconductor industry is the backbone of Taiwan's economy. So I'd like to ask you, what kind of strategy do you have going forward? Okay, I'll respond very quickly because I understand that our time is running out. Well, before I answer your question, I want to share something. I mean, Mr. Li already talked to us a lot. And of course, we want green energy, but we also want very stable supply because we are running very precise processes. So our energy supply has to be very stable. And we are really doing all we can to secure green energy. Now, in our industry, we hope to build energy storage systems in our facilities, but we just don't have enough space. And also, the building code may be a challenge for us. We want to have energy storage facilities, but that is not always in compliance with the building code. So anyway, at ASE, we've been working with our supply chain partners. Now, obviously, we also rely on our supply chain partners. So we have to do all we can to help them transition, to help them identify the big emission sources. And we are also working with our supply chain partners to buy green energy. We really spare no costs in working on this area, in securing green energy, but it's very difficult. Now, of course, it was mentioned earlier that TSMC has bought off almost all the green energy generated in Taiwan. It's difficult for us to buy green energy. Now, of course, in other countries, many wind power farms are providing energy, but of course, to develop a wind farm, you need a lot of capital. And to secure loans, you need to be creditworthy in the eyes of banks. So sometimes it may be difficult for certain developers to secure loans. Now, I said again and again that it's difficult for us to buy green energy, but still we have to do better. And we also want to work on the so-called responsible purchasing. So in our purchasing strategies, we'll also take a look at a supplier's sustainability practice. So in the past, we were solely focusing on costs, prices. But the thing is, now you have to take into account the externalities. So if you are only looking at product prices without taking a look at the externalities, maybe in the end, the cost will be higher for you. So responsible procurement is extremely important. And I want to give you an example. So the procurement, let's say if we want to hire migrant workers, and it's a procurement process for us, and we need to recruit migrants and also provide good employment conditions, and these conditions have to be in line with international standards. So that's what we have to do.
So as I said, we need to form alliances in our purchases. And the last issue is this. I want to tell you that in the future, with our suppliers, we will invest together to invest in the development of new technologies and new products. Right now, we do that for raw materials, but in the future, there will be more and more requirements on raw materials. So in the future, we will work with our suppliers in developing new technologies. We have spent billions or tens of billions on R&D. We will do that in the future with our suppliers. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wang. We have JMV. If we cannot buy green electricity, they provide solutions, especially for SMEs. What are the solutions that you provide? Well, Mr. Wang mentioned something very important: banks. Indeed, right now, the biggest problem is that, well, the banks were willing to support renewable energy because Taipower guaranteed the money, and with the money, clients have the money to pay back to the banks. This is why many banks have been willing to do this. What I didn't finish a while ago was that offshore wind can be cheap, but international banks may not recognize you because they may say that, for example, if you have operation problems, you don't have money, then who is going to pay me back? This is one problem facing many companies. And a lot of offshore wind involves international syndicated loans, so the requirements are very high. So it's not necessary that the prices will go down for sure. I just saw that Bank Sinopac is also a sponsor. We work with them in working on a mechanism which can solve this problem. And this is a trust mechanism. For example, some SMEs can use this trust mechanism so that banks can be more reassured. It can be 1 to 2 months electricity revenue put into the bank so that the bank becomes more willing to support such a project. There's another good mechanism in Taiwan's laws and regulations. If you don't get paid, you can go to Taipower for them to pay you. So for banks, there's a second layer of guarantee. I think for SMEs, there are still some solutions. I just listened to CPC and ASE groups sharing. I feel that we need to learn a lot from them. I think there are many companies in this industry working together. I'm sure that over the next few years in solar, energy storage, offshore wind, and many other areas, there will be improvement. Right now, there is demand for green electricity according to RE100. And net zero is really challenging and difficult. I mentioned 2050, but we should look longer terms because it's difficult even for us to achieve that by 2050. We will continue to help our clients talking about the situations that they are faced with. We can adopt more customizations and discuss the client's needs. There are many laws and regulations involved. We can do a lot of discussions and breakthroughs in terms of laws and regulations. We listen to the client's needs and we design accordingly to break through relevant laws and regulations so that we can work towards net zero emission. This is our goal and we are confident in achieving that. Well, I'll stop here due to time limits. Thank you, Ms. Zhao. You mentioned some obstacles in international syndicated loans. Well, Taiwan's laws and regulations do have some flexibilities. So finally, I want to ask all of you, the legal environment, what are your expectations and recommendations? There are many breakthroughs needed in our laws and regulations. I talked a lot about hydrogen. There is no laws and regulations in hydrogen, so we can actively provide some learnings from Japan and Europe. They have used hydrogen for a long time. I just mentioned that there was the first hydrogen train in Germany last year, and Airbus is studying hydrogen airplanes in France. But we haven't even had the first hydrogen station. So laws and regulations are a big issue, and it has to do with quantification and evaluations. laws and regulations can go first. Technologies can go second. I think technological maturity requires time and investment and development. But well, in addition to hydrogen, I also mentioned geothermal. This is the same issue. So far, there isn't any chapter dedicated to geothermal in our laws and regulations. Last October, the Bureau of Energy had a renewable energy amendment. At least they put some development, exploration, and operation rules in our law, but we still need a dedicated act for geothermal because water rights, mining rights, and environmental evaluation are all important for this industry. And this is a very important issue in the Ministry of Economic Affairs as well. With such a dedicated act for hydrogen, well, not only hydrogen and geothermal, solar also requires dedicated laws and regulations. CPC has made a lot of efforts. What we can do right now is to use the rooftop of gasoline stations, but we also want to have ground-mounted panels. But there are a lot of restrictions from the government because a lot of our land of gasoline stations is dedicated for specific purposes. If we want to change the land use, we cannot do that because it has to do with urban planning laws and regulations. There are many restrictions and limitations. I think we need to loosen our Solar Energy Act. And we need dedicated laws and regulations for hydrogen and geothermal, as I said. They can go first, and then technological development will determine whether or not they can become new business models, and they can determine whether or not we can reduce costs. Otherwise, with high prices, everyone will go bankrupt. But it's not possible that we don't do anything because why 2050? Because every year the entire world emits 40 billion tons of CO2. So in order to control a temperature increase within 2 degrees, we can only emit 800 billion. So we only have 20 years to go. So if the technologies are not fast enough, then before 2050, our climate will lead to many climate refugees. Well, thank you. So you mentioned laws and regulations. Do you want to add something? Well, I previously taught law at school, so I'm very sensitive to this issue. For ASE, in addition to what was just said, I think green economic activities develop very rapidly, but the laws and regulations cannot catch up fast enough. In Taiwan, there are, well, it should be a positive listing approach rather than a negative listing approach. Well, when we need to invest so much capital, the capital, should it be considered as investment or cost? Well, of course, as investment, there can be some subsidies, but as cost, it will be great burden for enterprises. So the government, well, the moderator just talked about international laws and regulations. That's even more complicated. Right now, our operation, well, we are starting to feel pressure from the United States, and we don't have the bargaining power to negotiate with the United States when they asked us to provide the list of some clients. The government in Taiwan asked us to comply because the government thought that it would be beneficial to the development of our industry, but actually it was a big taboo for us to disclose such a list. So we negotiated with the United States while trying to protect the privacy of our clients, and the Taiwanese government helped us on that. I think we want to have more communication, and the government needs to consider the interests of Taiwanese enterprises, especially with the geopolitical tensions right now. In the future, green dedicated chapters will be non-duty trade obstacles. So if we don't do that, how can we do business with the EU? So basically, we have to follow such a rule from the European Union. When it comes to international law, it's complicated. When there are non-duty trade obstacles, it's very complicated. And within Taiwan, we have to, for example, we have to let Thai power and energy companies having more experimental approaches, which is a more negative listing approach. When something is not prohibited, it should be allowed. I think by doing so, it's easier for enterprises to achieve RE100. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. Can I ask Mr. Liang to maybe give us the conclusion? Well, obviously, companies don't want the government to regulate too much. But at certain crucial moments, the government should definitely come out to clarify the rules. So I understand the difficulties faced by Mr. Li. I remember 2015, 2016, Toyota already launched the Mirai, which is a hydrogen-powered car. And then Prime Minister Abe also took a look at the car. He visited the factory. So perhaps we don't have to be so pessimistic in the face of these difficulties. I understand that you are facing great challenges. And we understand that Japan and Germany already have many advanced technologies. So perhaps going forward, what we have to do is to follow these countries. And I know that Mr. Li has already relayed many of his ideas to government ministers, at least to Minister Gong Mingxin at the National Development Council. And at the media, what we can do is that we can also try to advocate for businesses so that the government can hear the voice of the industries. I think that's also a key point of our forum. Now, the media has always been called the fourth estate, and we are also one of the stakeholders in the whole process. So we have to report the voices of the government, the industry, and also the academia. We should also report the different voices from abroad. That's our duty. And this way, we'll know the latest developments. For example, what is the progress of the CBAM implementation and what is the U.S. going to do on the policy front. So that's the role of the media. And I also hope that through our work, we can also draw a clearer picture for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Liang. Our time is running out, but I understand that you probably want to listen to these speakers more. But in the future, we'll also have other forums. Once again, thank you very much for attending this forum. Thank you. Again, thank you very much for the attendance and your support. I'm sure that all of us have learned a lot from the forum. And USTV will also organize several green energy-centered forums. Thank you again for your participation, and we'll see you next time.